The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to The Creative Psychotherapist. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm very excited to welcome my next guest on the show today, where we're going to be talking all about different aspects of marketing and why that is really important for your business and your brand and getting your practice visible. So welcome, Joel Connor. He is the founder and director of Blue Swing Media, which is a content digital marketing service. And he and his team provide a suite of kind of digital marketing services for small businesses. And he is also creating, in the process of launching, an additional marketing business, which is going to be solely focused on video marketing, and that's going to be called Epic Marketing. And welcome. Epic Video. Thank you, Joel. Would you mind kind of sharing a little bit more about yourself and your background and
Sure.
what you do as a marketer?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm honored to be here, and I hope that our discussions will really help a lot of people move forward and get some clarity on things that they can be doing to be more successful. So, as we all are aware, that the visibility of any type of business, local or national, has really moved to the digital side of the spectrum.
Totally.
And it is kind of a landscape that is constantly evolving. It's changing every year, every few months. Things change. There are multiple ways to engage digitally, and there are some simple things that a lot of business owners, especially in smaller areas, smaller towns, there are people that are way behind the curve, and they miss out on a lot of opportunities. So the good thing is a great many things that they could be doing are actually free. They just take a little bit of insight and a little bit of effort. But let me back up, and I'll just share kind of how I got into this space.
Please do.
Give you the very short, condensed version. So I was a school teacher for many years, and we adopted a boy about, almost 14 years ago. And then he had some special needs, and then we had a daughter, biological daughter, and she also was born deaf. And so so I was around kids all day as a school teacher, and then I would come home and not have much left to give my children. So I really was kind of wanting to change into another career. And so I had a good friend who was a software developer, and they were working on some website development stuff. And so I called him and I said, hey, what can I do where I could kind of use some of my creative energy and pick it up fairly quickly and maybe launch into a new career. And so he told me to learn HTML, CSS, and Photoshop. And so I just started on that same day, studying night and day until I was able, about maybe about a month later, I got an internship working at a web agency doing website design. So I was starting out at the very bottom and worked really hard until maybe about 4 or 5 months later, I was one of their top website builders, and I got to work on
Wow.
some really, really big and exciting projects over the next few years. And then during that time, it was in 2014, the firm that I was working with was, I don't know, maybe about 10 or 11 hours away. So they gave me their permission to start up a small agency of my own in my area.
Oh,
And so
cool.
I started building websites for people locally, and I had that skill, and they were all happy to have a beautiful website for, you know, a very reasonable price because I had no overhead. And but then we came to I came to understand the real challenge for them was getting their website found. So they had a great website, they had a place to send people, but nobody was finding them. So, and also for my agency, I had built, you know, my website and everything. So I started to learn all the little digital marketing pieces on behalf of my clients. So I started reading and taking courses. You know, I probably read close to 100 books on marketing in the last few years, and taken a bunch of courses, just trying to figure out, because it's very competitive.
Yeah.
When you talk about marketing, you now have global competition. There's a lot of people in the space, but there's not that many people that do it very well,
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually also afford. So um, that's kind of how I got into learning all the little pieces from what you would call SEO, or search engine optimization, content marketing, digital advertising or paid advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, and then there's so many little pieces that come together. And then I over the last few years, what we have seen get really good results for our clients is what we call content marketing. And that's kind of our
Mm-hmm.
sweet spot that we try to focus in on, because once that piece is working well, it never gets turned off. Whereas if you're running ads, your ads, once you turn them off, you're pretty much invisible.
I totally 100% agree. And that's my message when I'm talking with other therapists. You have so much knowledge to share, and that knowledge becomes the way to reach the audience,
Mm-hmm.
versus paying for those ads, which, yeah, like you said, once you're out of money, then then you're back to square one of, okay, well, now I
Mm-hmm.
have to reinvest more money in that area, which they
Yes.
can be
Um,
helpful.
yes, ads definitely have their place, and every vertical is so different. You're dealing with people who are bombarded with advertisements, especially uh, disruptive advertisements like on social media platforms. You have to have them dialed in perfectly for them to really be effective. And in some cases, it's just, you know, basic math. If they're working, then it makes sense to keep them on.
Hmm.
But you have to really be on top of the numbers, how much you're spending and how much you're getting as a return. And then you can also use ads for kind of initial boost to kind of
Hmm.
get in front, expand your audience a little bit. And then once you have that audience built up a little bit, your content kind of engages them.
Right.
So
Right. So it's thinking about it in different ways. It's very nuanced.
mhm. Yeah, and it takes a lot of monitoring. You can't be sloppy with it. So definitely is. It takes some insight, uh, how to get it set up properly, and then a lot of monitoring and making adjustments and things like that. And the other thing about, especially working if you're doing work with Facebook and / Instagram, who are now together, Facebook is very fickle about shutting you down for no apparent reason, and you can't really do anything about that. And your Facebook page, you don't really own it, but your domain, your website, that's why I tell people the two things you really own are your domain, your website, and your contact list. Those two things that are, if you grow those, it doesn't matter if Facebook decides one day that they're just going to stop having certain categories, which they can totally do that, and you're powerless to,
Right.
stop them. So
That's huge with people creating different types of groups on Facebook and kind of engaging their audience in that way. If they decide, oh, we're not going to do groups anymore, you're going to have to pay for groups, and then you've lost, all those thousands of people if you don't have their contact information. Maybe we should kind of pivot and talk a little bit about how we can use the content marketing in order to build that email list and that contact list.
Florida Art Therapy Services is a proud sponsor of the TCP podcast. They offer art therapy for individuals and groups, as well as qualified supervision services and high-quality, experiential-driven continuing education for art therapists, mental health counselors, and clinical social workers. Visit www.floridaarttherapyservices.com for more information. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast, we have copper, silver, and gold options. So visit www.creativeclinicianscorner.com/podcast for more information.
Where should people start with that?
So this is very, very key piece to it, because if you get this out of order, it can be a big waste of your efforts. But just before we jump into that, I wanted to say, for those who are listening, Google, when they develop their search algorithm to where they're delivering the highest quality result, that set them apart from a search standpoint. When somebody has a need and they go in and search, Google is the go-to search engine. And then they tried Google Plus as a Facebook competitor, and it really flopped.
Oh yeah,
But then they
that.
pivoted and created Google My Business for local businesses. And Google My Business it's a very, very big player for any local business that cannot be ignored, because they've done a couple things that were really, really smart on their end. And that is, they made a way for people to review businesses that was very hard to tamper with, or whereas Amazon has reviews, you don't know if they're all legitimate or fake or whatever, but Google does a pretty good job of, you have to be a real person, a real Google user to come in and make these reviews. So those two pieces, especially the Google My Business, it's super important for any local business to get that set up. It's free. Just takes a few days for you to verify that you're a real business. They send you a postcard, and then it's a free place where you can post content, and you can get reviews. Reviews are, depending on your industry, people will go to look at Google reviews, but if they don't have an outside reference, they're going to go to those reviews to make a decision. Am I going to call this business or not? Even if that is the highest ranking business for whatever search terms, they're still going to go back and read those reviews a lot of times. So having that in place is super important. So, but the part about developing content, all right, so you start with words, and there are tools for researching search volume. But even without those tools, Google gives you a great way to do some research for free using their search engine.
Okay.
And you can open up a Chrome tab and go to to google.com, instead of just typing it up in the top piece of the browser, go to google.com, and then you start typing in the words that you think someone would type in when they're looking for your type of service. And then you will see a drop down with the most likely or the most common search terms that people commonly type in related to your term. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of that search, there are suggestions that you can look at. And that is a good way to start to validate the content that you want to start creating. And so when people a lot of times think about blogging or vlogging or whatever,
Sure.
they sometimes think about these, big personalities that have 1 million viewers and, these big online celebrities. That's not the way that you want to approach your blog and just your random thoughts for the day. You want to be very, very focused in on search, what people are searching for related to your business. So then you can look at, other content that's out there, and then you want to start to write content based on those keywords.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you post your content, you want to make sure your keywords are in the title of your post, which will also be in your URL. And then you want to use those keywords and similar words, industry words, throughout your content. And here's the big point that I want people to understand. Post it on your website first, because it will get indexed with Google there, and your domain will get the credit. But if you post it on Facebook, or if you post it somewhere else first, your domain doesn't get that credit, and it doesn't grow in its domain authority. So that's the foundational piece.
Can you speak to what domain authority is for people that might not understand what that means?
Okay, so there's, I don't know the exact number of different parts of the algorithm that calculate domain authority, but I know what the main ones are. But there's like 100 different things that they're tracking that all kind of calculate your domain authority. And so the higher your domain authority, the more likely your website's going to rank for those search terms that you're going after. So 100 would be the highest possible score. And when you start out with a brand new domain, you'll be at 0. And so Google looks at the age of your domain. It looks at the words, the content that's on your website. It looks at links going out from your website to other websites, and also internal links. They're linking from one internal page to another. It looks at links that are pointing to your website from other websites. And it also looks at what types of websites those are. So, and those are called backlinks. So like if there's an authoritative site in your industry that cites your site and sends a link, says check out this post on your website, and points a link to your site, that's a very, very strong indicator to Google, and that will boost your domain authority. And a lot of SEO or search engine people focus a lot on trying to get those backlinks, and it's a fairly complicated and involved process. However, if you create really, really good content, what's neat is Google will work for you, and you will generate those backlinks organically. And that's how Google really wants things to work anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know I get like a lot of people at least 5 a week, probably more sometimes, of people like, hi, I noticed that you have all of these great resources on your website. We're this, we just wrote this article. Why don't you consider putting it on there? And they are relentless. They keep coming
Yeah.
at you and keep coming at you about doing that. I just delete them.
Yeah.
I just don't have enough brain space to be really evaluating whether or not, one, are they creating valuable enough content for me to actually want to put that on my website and direct people to? But two, it just feels gross.
Yeah. So that's a good sign though for your website. That means that you're visible enough that those people, they see your domain authority and they're probably being hired by one of those businesses to try to get a link back to their site. And sometimes that there there's a whole industry built around trying to get those. But so there's one other piece though that's important for your domain authority that I didn't touch on, and that is what is called social signals.
I've not heard
So
of that.
social signals basically are, well, after you post your page, your post on your website, it's a best practice then, at some point later, to share that page to your social media channels.
Mm-hmm.
And then how much engagement comes around that piece of content is called a social signal. And it sends, so for example, you create a really great post about one topic and then you share it on Facebook and Twitter or whatever. And then if a lot of other people say, hey, this was great, I'm going to share it again. And then it starts getting shared from people who just come to your website, and that Google sees that, and those social signals basically helps boost your domain authority a little bit as well.
Okay. I'm learning a lot today, Joel. Awesome.
So it all starts with words. That's the foundational piece. Everything else builds off of that. And that's where you get into taking that type of content and possibly creating other valuable pieces of content, like possibly, infographics, video. Video outperforms any other type of media in terms of engagement if the video is, solid and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
just did a post on the Blue Swing Media site, and I did a YouTube video on how to create engaging content. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of came out of a couple of books that I'm reading, and I'm learning about film production
Mm-hmm.
and best-selling novels, and some of the same principles of engagement that they use. You can incorporate that, and that's what I kind of touched on in that post. It's called How to Create Engaging Content, I think.
Okay, awesome. So I'll put a link, how to create engaging content. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes so that people can go directly to your website to find that video and learn a little bit more about that. So we're kind of talking about the content marketing piece. So it starts with the words, which we can search the terms to see what match up with what our business is, the purpose of our business is, and see what people are searching related to that, and then create the content which will drive the traffic because we're establishing ourselves as an authority according to the search engine tool. And then they then push your web link, your URL up the chain when people are searching
Right.
for that service.
Right.
All right.
And then, if you just launch a website, just to give you a heads up, Google basically labels your website as a baby, and does not and pretends like you don't really exist for a while. So it takes a little bit of time. So even if your post is way better than the other posts that are out there, it won't get seen at first. But over time, it'll grow and grow and grow. And then, for example, this is why the quality is so important. Another factor in the algorithm is bounce rate, or if someone comes to your page and they read like one sentence and then they click away, Google sees that as being not good content. But if they stayed
Mm.
on that page for 3 or 4 minutes or 10 minutes, and they copy and paste out of it and they really engage with it, Google will say, here's a great piece of content, I'm going to send more traffic there. So that's why quality is a big factor. And I actually, a lot of our posts, I go back in and I put a video embed on that post, because people will stay on the page longer and watch the video. It's about the same content, basically.
Okay. So in terms of written content, I've read, I've heard a couple of different things from different people. Some people say less is more. Some people say more is more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there a specific strategy that we should be thinking about when we're creating content? Like, what would be advantageous to do a less is more approach versus the advantages of a more is more approach?
Okay, so I think the big thing here, the big word to consider would be consistency.
Mm.
So obviously, if you're the more consistently you're putting out content, that's a signal showing that your website is active. And then, but you'd never want to substitute, or you never want to uh, decrease the quality of your content. And you never ever want to post someone else's content as yours. I mean, you can quote other people in your content, because Google actually has already given that credit to the other websites. So you get absolutely nothing from posting someone else's content. So I recommend a schedule, or something that if you're going to be writing your own content, like one of the things that we do for our clients is we develop and post content for them.
Mm-hmm.
And we write the content, we optimize it, and we post it on a schedule. But if you're going to be doing your own content, writing it, if you don't schedule it into your life, it most likely will never happen. And a few years back, I wrote a book, and that's the only way I was able to get traction with getting my book done, was to have a routine. This is where I'm going to write from here to here at this day at this time. And it was early in the morning before everybody else was awake. I would get up and I would write. And if you don't schedule it, it never happens. Even some of the most motivated business owners that I work with and talk with, they even have people they can hire in their staff to write, and it never gets done, and they never get the traction that they want. And that's why a lot of people end up just hiring us to do it. But like, if you're in that industry, you know it better than we do, and all of our content writers will do our best to craft great content. However, if you can do it yourself, it'll be more personable, and you'll have more insight. If you can develop that skill of writing, it's a great foundational piece for your content marketing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that the more successful the businesses become, the less time that we have to dedicate to some of these more creative endeavors. But writing as a creative endeavor, but it's also important to the marketing piece of just letting people know who you are, what you do, what you're knowledgeable about, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It does become super important to have it built into your schedule and carved out, because otherwise we just get so busy that it doesn't rank as high in priority of some of the other maybe crisis type, I got to put out this fire type thing. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, I really should, but I'm too tired and I'll do it
Mhm.
tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's great. Great tips
The
there.
the neat thing about what we've been able to do with some of our clients is that content that we've developed like 3 years ago is still getting consistent traffic, and they're still on the top of Google for those search terms. And we continue to put out new content, but we don't have to do it as consistently. And those same posts that we made long ago, they're still, once you have created content, it's there. It's going to be there. And you can
Right.
leverage it for years to come. Some of the Even when you're on YouTube, some of the videos that pop up as the top ranking video are like from 2013. And this is somebody made a great video and it's still adding value. So yeah.
Right. It's an evergreen situation. Once you create it, it will continue to work for you if it's done well.
Yep. And then you have to promote it, and you have to be consistent enough for it to be found. But once you get to that point, then your investment is going to pay off. So
Yeah, that's great. So in terms of SEO, I know like all of what we just talked about with the authority, the domain authority, and the words, doing the search in Google to find out what terms are being searched the most. Is there anything else that people should understand about SEO when they're just kind of thinking about this for the first time? I know I had no idea what it was when I opened my practice. It's only like all of these things are just things I've been learning along the way. Um,
yeah, so that's it. It's a little complicating the way that people use the word SEO. Um, it basically means search engine optimization, and initially it was about optimizing your code and your web pages to be Google friendly. And then um, over time, it kind of expanded in what it meant. And you focused on what they call off-page SEO, which is building up your backlinks and all of these other pieces that go into effect. Um, and I can touch a little bit on page. Most of your website builders or website platforms are SEO friendly if you go in there and plug in what you need to put in there just to communicate well with Google what your page is about. For example, the page title, which shows up in the browser tab, should have your main key focus keyword in it.
okay.
And at the very top of your page, there's a little bit of code, and it's a title tag called H1, or it should be header 1. And that tells Google that text is the most important text on that page, and you want your keywords in that section also. And those are very like basics of what you would call on-page SEO, search engine
Okay.
optimization. And then you want to have your keywords sprinkled here and there throughout your page content, and also down at the end. You don't want to stuff too many keywords in there, which actually before Google's algorithm was a little more advanced, you could do that, and it was called keyword stuffing. And if you had 29 keywords in there and your competitor had 28, you would outrank them. But now if you do that, Google will flag your page and you won't show up at all. So yeah, but the reason I like focusing on content marketing is because over SEO is because what Google is trying to do is provide relevant results. Even for Google Ads, they will only show ads that they think are relevant to
Okay.
the search, because they are trying to provide a good user experience. So when you develop useful, helpful, engaging content, uh, you're kind of playing by Google's rules, and then a lot of the other technical stuff you don't even have to worry about. You just worry about, keeping in mind you're connecting on search terms and creating content around that. Actually, there's one point that I left out that's also super important. When you're looking at those search terms, you want to build on search terms that have what I call searcher's intent. You want to consider not just things that people are typing in a lot, but the things that they're typing in when they're ready to do business with you, when they're actually searching to connect with your business. For example, have a client's a dog trainer, and we could go after all sorts of fun dog related terms that people search all the time, but they're not looking for a dog trainer with those terms. We want to go after the terms when somebody has a pain point with their puppy, is pooping all over the house or whatever. Then we show up. They actually want a trainer, and those are the kind of terms that we go after. So it's important to keep in mind the intent of the search.
And how do you determine that when you're looking up these terms?
It takes a little bit of human intuition, for the most part, trying to put your shoes in the same mindset that your searcher has.
Okay.
What are they going to type in when they're ready to do, music therapy or play therapy? It could be, that's where you have to kind of be careful. A lot of people go to search when they're trying to solve a problem on their own. And it's okay. It's fine to provide content for the people in those situations, because you will start to build a little bit of trust if they come to your content.
That makes sense. You have to think about that in a different way, because you could put in something like play therapy or art therapy or music therapy in the search term, but it might bring you to like a professional association or organization that kind of represents that field, but people wanting to know more about it. But just because they want to know more about it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually want that service.
Right. So you have two different approaches there. You definitely want to focus heavily in on the search terms where you know that they're ready to engage and do business with you first. But in the other case, what you need to provide is a very personable, helpful piece of content, preferably where you can actually introduce yourself through video and say, these are the exact things that we do. This is what we're passionate about. And you give them you transition into the invitation to do business with you. So it is still a great path. It's just not as direct, but you don't want to just put the content out there without giving them that invitation and the opportunity to work with you.
So if people are going to be using video, do they need to be thinking about it in terms of a similar framework as creating the content that is written? So by like using the same terms in spoken language on the video?
So when I create a post for Blue Swing Media, and then I go back around and create a YouTube video for it, I'm going after the exact same terms, the exact same title. It's implemented a little bit differently in YouTube to get your results, but it's the same. It's pretty much the same target.
Okay.
But you don't have to get in front of a camera to provide video content. You can use, pictures with text, kinetic text. There are a lot of great platforms for creating that kind of content. For example, we did a bunch of videos for real estate in Savannah, Georgia, on neighborhoods, and we were in South Florida, so we couldn't really go and get a lot of footage, but we did get some pictures And so we would just use pictures, music, and then give helpful stats about those neighborhoods. And that it's a, a helpful video. Now, a video of a real person standing in front of that neighborhood is going to outperform the latter type of video. So,
Gotcha.
but you don't have to, you can take your written content, summarize it, put it into a video format without having to be on the screen in front of a camera. So, and
All right.
it's pretty easy to do.
Very cool. So if somebody were looking to experiment doing that on their own, are there like technology, like film editing tools that are easy to learn or easier to learn or use? That seems
Well,
like an intimidating
yeah.
thing.
The good thing is most of your smartphones record pretty decent audio. I mean, pretty decent video. The audio actually is what is a little bit lacking in that case. However, you can purchase a little lapel mic, attach it to your smartphone, and you can, if your smartphone is like 4 or 5 years old, you might want to upgrade
Sure.
to a Samsung or an iPhone or something like that. You'll get pretty good quality video if your audio's decent and your lighting is decent. And so you can get pretty good lighting with natural light at sometimes, or you can get an LED light kit for pretty cheap, around $50 or so. Get some decent lighting, and make sure that your backdrop is looks all right. And then you just have to start practicing and trying. Getting you're going to be nervous being
Yes.
in front of camera. The good thing is you don't have to post it if it turns out
That's
too
so
bad, and you
true.
can actually edit out things if you kind of get stuck somewhere. So it just takes a little bit of practice, but a lot of people never get to the point. They always put it off and they just never start. So
I've started and stopped and started and stopped with the video for that very reason. Because I don't know what happens. It's almost like stage fright response where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm saying. And then I'm like, I don't have time. I need to get on to the next thing and I'll get back to that. And I don't. And, part of it is that I don't because I have to sit with my own discomfort around it and I have to work through that. I had to do that with the podcast too. At first, I just talked on here by myself and recorded and recorded and recorded and erased and erased and erased for a couple of months before I did my first official recording because it felt so unnatural and uncomfortable. But now it's fine. I'm used to it. I need to do that with the video too.
When I remember working really hard on a video early on, and I thought this is gonna be great. I felt really proud of myself, and then I went back and watched it, and I was like, "Oh, that was terrible." I just, but then, a little further along, I made some videos, and I still kind of feel in the same way. But some friends of mine saw the videos, and they said, you are your own worst critic. You're going to be analyzing every little thing. Most people are not going to be that critical of your production.
Right.
But then once you kind of get into the routine of it, you can relax a little more. You can actually enjoy that creative process.
Now, in your research in kind of understanding video marketing, is there a recommended length of time that people should be recording for?
Well, it really depends on the purpose of your video, but any type of promotional video, shorter is better.
Okay.
For Super Bowl commercials that are 30 seconds, they're getting their message across. It doesn't take that long to communicate your message. And if it's too long, people are just gonna, especially on social media, if you're doing disruptive advertisements on social media, shorter is better. And then if you're doing a training or a webinar where you need to go in depth, and you're really going into detail, those can be longer. But even in that case, I would say, you know, getting all of your content that you want, everything that you want to communicate in the shortest amount of time possible.
Okay.
And to be in as engaging and as helpful as possible. So
That makes
because
sense.
people are, you know, their attention span is so short, and there's so many distractions, other things that they could click on and go to. If it's not concise and engaging, they're just not going to consume it. And you can't force them to consume it unless you're sitting next to them saying, you must watch this. So
That's right. But there's a competition for our attention,
yep,
and our attention is like that's our time, and that is a high priced commodity, because I think we're all kind of living in a really fast paced world, and recognize that, like, okay, if you're not saying what I need you to hear, I'm going to move along to the next thing, because I just don't have time.
yeah, yeah.
um
And we have access to almost unlimited knowledge, or either information that's good or not so good, but it's all right there at the touch of our fingers, or a voice search. So if we're not providing value, and what we're saying is not very relevant to their situation, it will not take them but a few seconds to pivot from that.
yeah.
So,
Wow. This is a lot of really great information, Joel. um
thank you.
I know we could talk a lot about a lot more things, but I think maybe we should save that for another time. And
Okay.
let people kind of soak in on the content marketing aspect of things. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that you believe would be valuable to listeners related to the content marketing and the SEO aspect of things?
Okay, yeah, and this is there's a lot to it, obviously, but um, one thing that local businesses can really take advantage of is that Google's algorithm has advanced over the last few years to where local